Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Let's see what's coming up. And world leaders gathered in Kuala Lumpur as Malaysia is hosting world leaders for the 47th ASEAN Summit. ASEAN is central to India's Act East policy, serving as a cornerstone for economic, strategic and cultural engagement across the Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to join the ASEAN-India Summit virtually. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Modi spoke with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and extended greetings on Malaysia's assumption of the ASEAN chairmanship. He conveyed best wishes for the successful conduct of the ASEAN-related summits under Malaysia's leadership. PM reaffirmed India's commitment to further strengthening the ASEAN-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. India and ASEAN will look to strengthen cooperation in maritime security, counter-terrorism and cybersecurity, expedite the ASEAN-India trade in goods agreement to make it more effective and user-friendly, promote diverse, secure, transparent and resilient supply chains, cooperation in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, peacekeeping measures, cooperate on emerging technologies including AI, blockchain, Internet of Things, robotics, quantum computing, 6G, boost people-to-people ties with 2025 designated as the ASEAN-India Year of Tourism. And the world leaders have gathered in Kuala Lumpur for the 47th ASEAN Summit. ASEAN is central to India's Act East policy, serving as a cornerstone for economic, strategic and cultural engagement across the Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to join the ASEAN-India Summit virtually. And earlier this week, PM Modi spoke with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and extended greetings on Malaysia's assumption of ASEAN chairmanship. He also conveyed best wishes for the successful conduct of the ASEAN-related summits under Malaysia's leadership. And of course, my colleague Jessica is joining me live, and also I have Ashok Sajjanar, who's former senior diplomat, and also Professor Harshvardhan Pant, Vice President ORF, joining me live on the broadcast. Welcome all. First to you, Jessica. What can we expect this time around from the ASEAN Summit?
Well, there are a lot of issues that will dominate the summits this year, particularly related to the Thailand peace talks, or whether it's about navigating the global economic order, given the kind of tariffs that have been put by the American administration, even on the ASEAN nations, and also the induction of Timor-Leste. And let's not forget the 5-point consensus for Myanmar, which is also part of the ASEAN, the agendas in the last few years. So a lot that would be looked forward to in terms of ASEAN engagement, and even with India's presence there, with Dr. S. Jaishankar representing India and the Prime Minister shortly to now address the ASEAN Summit and lay out India's plan and further engagement with ASEAN, which earlier, a decade ago, was Look East policy and then was Act East policy. So certainly a lot has changed in the last 10 years. India's engagement has increased, not just in the Indo-Pacific region, where you also had INS Doordarshan, which took an expedition to various ASEAN countries, showing India's support for a free and open and inclusive Indo-Pacific, which India feels it would want to see an order which is not hegemonic and perhaps takes into consideration of all the countries in the region, specifically in the South China Sea. And apart from that, you've seen India's outreach to the ASEAN nations, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the last decade has attended various East Asia summits and also ASEAN summits held across the last 10 years or so. So we've seen how India has changed its position from Look East to Act East. But yes, there are considerable moments and exchanges of ideas, and also in terms of enhancing trade with ASEAN countries, which India is now keen to do, given its economic heft. And perhaps India will take advantage of that economic well-being, so to say, at this point in time, and engage with the ASEAN leaders, given the mutual concerns between the two when it comes to the sudden shift in the geo-economic order. Siddharth.
Definitely, Jessica, stay with us. I'll get back to you. Mr. Sajjana, now I want to ask you, like my correspondent, my colleague Jessica was saying that a lot has changed in the last 10 years. What can you tell us about the significance of this summit, to our viewers?
Yeah, thank you very much, Siddharth. You're right. We celebrated the 10th anniversary of the ACT East Summit, our policy last year, because that was launched in 2014. From 1992, we had the Look East policy, and that also had registered some very significant achievements, some very significant successes. I think when we are talking about ASEAN, we need to remember, Siddharth, that, although our relationship, our dialogue partnership with the ASEAN might have started in 1992. We started as a sectoral dialogue partner. Then we became in 1992, we became a full dialogue partner in 1996. We became summit level partner and a strategic partner in 2002. We had also the India-ASEAN FTA, which was signed launched in 2002, signed in 2009. So there's been a progress. In 2022, we had the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two sides, India and ASEAN, that has been signed. So our relations are very vibrant as far as our ACT East policy and our Indo-Pacific vision is concerned. ASEAN is a very strong pillar of that, our ACT East policy. Prime Minister Modi has been participating, over the last 10, 11 years. He's participated in all the summit meetings. Of course, during the COVID time, it was done virtually because no in-person summit meetings were held. He missed out only on in 2022 when, there were some domestic engagements. And this time also, Prime Minister is going to be participating in the India-ASEAN Summit in a virtual format. Tomorrow will be the East Asia Summit. So, in Kuala Lumpur, there are 3 big summits that are being organized at this moment. First is amongst the ASEAN countries themselves. There are 10 members of the ASEAN. Today, they become 11 members, as the ticker at the bottom of this news shows. East Timor, Timor-Leste, has become the 11th member of the ASEAN. It started in 1967, so it's been growing and progressing. And in addition to that, what is of interest to India is the India-ASEAN Summit, which will take place today. And then that is the 22nd summit. And tomorrow will be the East Asia Summit, in which Dr. Jaishankar will be participating. Our relations, whether it is in trade, whether it is in, you had right at the beginning mentioned about, the ASEAN-India agreement of trade in goods. That is a very important element. It was signed in 2009. It has been growing very satisfactorily. Today, we have more than $120 billion of bilateral trade in goods with the ASEAN, but this is again tilted against India. It is, we have a trade deficit with ASEAN. And since 2022, we have been having a negotiation for better implementation of this and seeing what are the changes that could be made in this ASEAN-India trade in goods agreement. That will be an important element. In addition to that, of course, there is, this year has been designated as the year of tourism. Next year, India has proposed it should be designated as an India-ASEAN year of maritime cooperation. So in which we have, in terms of freedom of navigation, sustainable fisheries, regional disaster cooperation.
Right, right.
So there are many areas, critical technologies, emerging technologies. All these areas are going to be discussed today during the India-ASEAN Summit.
Definitely. We also have Professor Pant with us. Professor Pant, I would like to ask you, how do you see this change in approach from look east to act east? How do you analyze this?
Hi, thank you, Siddharth. See, it has been a very important shift because the words themselves reflect the new realities that India had been confronting in Southeast Asia for a while. And the Look East policy was largely around economic and trade ties, and that was the time in early 1990s when it was launched. It was about India building partnerships, India building trade and economic partnerships with a very economically dynamic part of the world, which was Southeast Asia, and ASEAN were at the heart of it. ASEAN nations. And then I think by 2014, when we had the Modi government changing the nomenclature, it was a reflection of the fact that the strategic realities had evolved. India itself had become an important economic player, and there was an element of interest on the ASEAN side to have India as an important economic partner, but beyond that as an important strategic partner, because of the kind of challenges that were already visible even then. Because the traditional roadmap that ASEAN nations have followed is a two-pronged one, where they rely on China, where they have traditionally tended to rely on China as their economic benefactor, and the US as a security one. And I think that model worked for a long time. But now I think ASEAN is finding that model is creating more problems than it is solving, because it is a highly contested space in Southeast Asia at the moment, particularly between US and China. We have seen Mr. Trump's statements committing US to a long-term partnership with ASEAN, which had been a cause of worry to some countries in ASEAN. And I think ASEAN wants diversification of its partners. And India, therefore, emerges not simply as an economic partner, but also as a partner that has a strategic heft in the region that is demonstrable today. So I think in that sense, the arc of India's policy towards the region, towards ASEAN, towards Southeast Asia has moved very nimbly from look east to act east, reflecting the ground level realities and reflecting the aspirations both in New Delhi and in ASEAN, among ASEAN members. And now, of course, the contestation, great power contestation is sharpening. The ASEAN itself is under enormous pressure. There are challenges from Myanmar to South China Sea to Thailand, Cambodia, for example, for which the agreement was signed in Mr. Trump's presence, already indicate that change is coming to ASEAN, and ASEAN is having to find new ways of managing that shift, managing that turbulence. And I think partnering with India allows it to leverage that partnership towards that stability. And I think the fact that India believes in ASEAN centrality, the fact that India wants an open, inclusive Indo-Pacific, means that India wants ASEAN to play a critical role. And in that sense, I think the relationship from look east to act east has grown organically based on whether we have seen people-to-people ties, economic ties, and now increasingly maritime ties, security ties, strategic ties, which I think are going to be important, shapers of this very important bilateral engagement, which is not only institutional at the level of ASEAN, but also bilateral at the level of individual member states. It used to be 10, now 11.
Exactly. Jessica, on the very first day of the summit, a lot of developments took place, from East Timor becoming the 11th member of ASEAN bloc to Cambodia and Thailand signing a historic peace deal in Trump's presence. How do you sum up that, when it comes to the mechanism of ASEAN, which is to resolve disputes within the group? And now with Trump's intervention, do you think it has added an additional impetus to that mechanism of the bloc?
And you've seen successive United States President, Joe Biden, or his predecessors, which was Donald Trump, and now him again back in on his Asia tour and attending the East Asia Summit as well as the APEC Summit in South Korea. And you've seen that kind of engagement with the President of the United States in the past as well. But what it tells you this time around is because there are a lot of trade-related tensions between the United States and many other nations, especially with another dialogue partner at the ASEAN Summit, which is China. A lot is on the discussion table, apart from just what is sort of to take place in ASEAN with the Thailand-Cambodia peace talks and the final negotiation signing of the pact, which also requires the presence of Donald Trump as is being presented to the world. And apart from that, there is also a development building up on what needs to be done in terms of Myanmar, as the 5-point consensus has been put forth for their consideration, and how to further engage with the military junta, perhaps to have that regional stability and peace, not just on the waters, but also with the neighbors who've been part of ASEAN for a very long time. So a lot of deliberations, so to say, that would take place. But yes, there are a lot of dialogue partners as well, whose own engagements and whose pull asides in their bilateral meetings would also sort of highlight the importance of ASEAN Summit and how the West collectively, along with the United States, continues to engage with ASEAN, and what kind of issues does it sort of take into consideration, whether it's Taiwan or other, more important geo-economic and geopolitical issues.
Definitely, Jessica. Mr. Sajjanar, like I was just mentioning to my colleague Jessica, that on the very first day there have been a lot of developments, from Thailand-Cambodia peace deal to East Timor becoming the member. We also have one new development of the economic deal, which is signed by the United States to Cambodia and Malaysia as well as Thailand. When it comes to Thailand, the critical minerals, few days back, if you remember, US and Australia signed a critical rare earths deal, critical minerals deal, and now with Thailand. What does it show,
Yeah, thank you. It is very clear that critical minerals, rare earths, that is an area that is of prime importance as far as the United States is concerned. Now, as far as Australia is concerned, that was a good deal, $8 billion, and there would be prospecting and there would be processing. Of course, Australia has a huge territory, very large, and it is known that it has very significant quantities of rare earths and critical minerals. But as far as Thailand and as far as Cambodia are concerned, I'm not really certain as to, what is the availability, and definitely in terms of the processing possibilities and prospects. I think those would be rather limited, but it does definitely.
Mr. Sajjanar, is it like signing the deal from wherever you can?
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, but we'll really have to wait and see. I would like to look at the finer details before sort of commenting in any concrete way, in any significant way. Right now, what has been announced is that it is a deal on critical minerals, and this would Mr. Trump would be wanting to strengthen his approach that I'm using tariffs as a foreign policy instrument, that is in terms of taking forward the US national interest, security interest forward. And also I'm using tariffs. This is some sort of an argument that has been made by the United States in its, in a legal case in a court, that this serves the national security purpose. And here signing the trade deal both with Thailand and Cambodia, particularly, of course, with Malaysia, because, Malaysia is the host, and, there would have been a deal that is being signed. But on that, trying to bring these two countries together, saying that, I've been able to bring them together because I've been able to use the instrument of tariffs. I've been able to use the instruments of trade. And of course, as far as rare earths and critical minerals, as I mentioned, and as you commented also, that let us see what are the possibilities. I don't know whether there is any very deep study that is available, that there are good prospects, good quantities of rare earths in Thailand and in Cambodia. But if there is, and both the countries can cooperate, it is good, because the more that we can get critical minerals into the global market, into global trade and commerce, the better it is, because we see that China is completely weaponizing the the processed critical minerals, and that is what it has said, that you'll have to seek permission even if the content of Chinese processed critical minerals is 0.01%. So this is really putting shackles on global industry, not only on the American economy, but also on the global economy. So I think the more that we can get from whatever sources are available into the international market, the better it is going to be.
Definitely. Professor Pant, I would like to ask you, when it comes to India-ASEAN relations, what challenges do you see when it comes to their deepening comprehensive strategic partnership?
I think the challenge is fundamentally how does ASEAN decide to move ahead with its foreign policy priorities at a time of great US-China contestation. I think the good old days where ASEAN could work together under the security guardianship of the US and with the economic dynamism of China, those days are over. Because increasingly countries are being forced to make choices, as you were talking about rare earths. Ultimately, countries are signing deals. Rare earth deal, for example, the ones that Mr. Trump has signed, indicates that certain countries are willing now to negotiate their private bilateral interests with the US in a way that does not preclude more tariffs, that does not lead to more tariffs or more sanctions. So countries are looking after their interests both individually, and ASEAN will also be doing that. So the question is, how far can ASEAN continue to pursue a strategic autonomy in decision making as it is getting buffeted on both sides? Now the good news is that they are trying their best. Therefore, a partnership with India becomes more important, and therefore more attention will be given as ASEAN diversifies its partnerships away from US and China. I think they will certainly would see in India a country with enough scale, with enough economic dynamism, with enough strategic heft to build a partnership. But also therein lies the challenge that if they are put under pressure by either China or the US, then what space will they have to build these partnerships? Because ultimately India would like a forward-looking partnership where the challenges of the 21st century can be met without the Damocles sword of other powers hanging. And I think in that sense, how far ASEAN would go to assert its autonomy, strategic autonomy, that would be an important marker. We know that the challenges that the ASEAN is facing is dividing ASEAN, and I think that's another challenge, that a divided ASEAN is becoming more and more apparent. It is a few days back there was a lot of discussion around the theme of continental ASEAN versus maritime ASEAN. That there are land-based countries that have very different set of challenges versus those countries which are largely maritime. And their strategic priorities are diverging. So if that happens, if ASEAN becomes divided, weak, vulnerable to external pressure and coercion, then I think India will also be taking a step back and evaluating certain options, although it does give India some opportunities as well.
Definitely. One more question I would like to ask you, that in today's world, maritime security is a big challenge. So how can India and ASEAN work together, when it comes to maritime security more effectively?
I think this is a unique moment because ASEAN had largely focused when it comes to maritime security on around its periphery, as India, Indian Ocean. So I think now when we talk of the Indo-Pacific, it seamlessly brings ASEAN and India together. And increasingly the case is being made by ASEAN members, several of them by India, and many in India, that look, we can't really look at Indian Ocean and Pacific as two distinct maritime zones. So if you believe that Indo-Pacific is a reality, and ASEAN took a long time in coming to that realization, but they have come to a realization that there is no getting away from the idea of the Indo-Pacific, then working together, institutionalizing cooperation, and bringing to bear their own strengths in their respective geographies. So if India is the leader in Indo-Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, and India has capabilities and strengths in the Indian Ocean, and then ASEAN member states would want to use those to leverage their India's strengths. Similarly, India would want to leverage the strengths that ASEAN member states have in their vicinity, around their periphery. And I think maritime domain awareness is something that everyone is bothered about, everyone is working towards. And this idea that next year should be the year of India-ASEAN maritime cooperation is a good indicator that both sides value this partnership in maritime security, and both sides are willing to invest diplomatic capital in building greater synergies there. And I think that is where, we are going to see more and more. India does a lot on maritime security with some individual member countries rather than ASEAN as a bloc. So I think there also some work needs to be done as to how ASEAN as a whole can become much more important driver in these conversations rather than some countries that have greater stake in the maritime cooperation endeavors.
All right, Professor Harshvardhan Pant, thank you so much for joining in. Jessica, I would like to ask you now that how do you see the role of emerging technologies, like AI, blockchain, quantum computing when it comes to the India-ASEAN relations? How do you analyze that? All right, Jessica, I would like to ask you that how do you see the role of emerging technologies like AI, blockchain and quantum computing when it comes to the India-ASEAN relations?
There's a lot that could be discussed in that aspect, pardon me. And in a sense that we've seen the kind of engagement, especially in the area of technology and digital transformation, has gone a long way, and India-ASEAN relations perhaps are taking a different trajectory even there. While I don't have a lot of input on that at this point, Siddharth, I think the expert would be best to answer an interesting question like that.
All right, Jessica. I would like to ask Mr. Ashok Sajjanar the same question. Sir, how do you see the role of emerging technologies when it comes to India-ASEAN relations? Emerging technologies like AI, quantum computing and blockchain.
Yeah, very important because, I think it is agreed and it is believed by everyone that it is technology that is going to determine the future, positioning of any country in the global economic and security architecture. As far as India is concerned, what we have been saying is that India was could not take full advantage as far as the industrial revolution is concerned, because at that time India was a colony and it was not free to use all the possibilities. But now India is determined as far as the technological revolution is concerned that we'll take full advantage. So whether it is in the area of semiconductors, it's in the area of manufacturing, it's in the area of quantum computing, it's in the area of AI. These are all areas, it's in the area of space. These are all areas where India is focusing a great deal. And there are great possibilities as far as the ASEAN is concerned, because you would recall that when the Prime Minister had gone to Singapore, then we had signed a large number of agreements in the area of manufacture of semiconductors, chips in India, and of course some of them, two of these production units, I understand, have already started producing semiconductors. Similarly is the case when we had the visit of the Malaysian Prime Minister to India recently, and there also, there were discussions and there were agreements that were signed. So I think there are individually or at a bilateral level, there are number of these countries, whether it is Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, etc., those that have very good possibilities, very good technological capabilities with whom we can cooperate. Also in terms of the governance, particularly of technology like AI. We know that this is a new technology. We do not really know what, meaning it has great advantages, great benefits, but also challenges.
All right, Mr. Sajjanar and Jessica, thank you both of you. And we are heading for a short break. Stay tuned to DD India.